it going?
Yes.
All right. So everybody's video is going to have a little 10 seconds or so with Ricardo talking on it, just like this. And then we're going to say, it's just to kind of ease you into the presentation. Let me get my clock ready. And we are ready when you are.
Alrighty. My Unity and Diversity talk is on Alfie Kahn's The Case Against Standardized Testing. So first I'm going to introduce Alfie Kahn. He was a former teacher, though he admits that most of his ideas on education come from seeing other teachers in the classroom as well as doing research on his own and just communicating with other educators and people in the field. I was honestly unable to find much personal information about him. He's the father of 2 children and he lives in Boston. But besides that, I really couldn't get anything, which I think could almost be a testament to the fact that he wants people to know more about his research and what he's doing in education rather than his personal life. Due to his focus on behavior, I'd like to think he may have a background in psychology, which is really interesting to me because my minor is in psychology, and so I've done like 21 hours so far, and I can already see how like behaviorism and the works of psychology have a direct impact on education and educating. In one of his other books, he includes a bit about himself and his experiences, and so from What to Look For in a Classroom and other essays, he quotes this part of his book. He really focuses on the process of opposing in order to affirm, and once we get further into the case against standardized testing, you'll see that he really does. He opposes this stuff, but then he hypothesizes ways that he can better it or make a difference. From this, he reflects how his writing relates to people and what the effect he wants to have on them. He offers it as an invitation to reconsider some of the basic practices. This is highly relevant, again, in the novel I'm about to present. He also suggests more meaningful questions than the ones that are typically asked, and challenges people to rethink the search for better methods of assessing students' work. He does a lot of talks, and one time he went into a 4th grade classroom, and after he went and talked to them about his theories and all that, the teacher made them write thank you notes to Mr. Kahn, and so one of the students wrote this, and I'll read it aloud. Dear Mr. Kahn, I'm glad you came in because it helped me understand your theory. I was wondering, though, why you decided to spend your lifetime doing this. I mean, I disagree with some things, but I wouldn't spend my lifetime disagreeing. And this is kind of what Alfie Kahn is all about. Like this is his life work. Like he's trying to make a difference, and sometimes like it may amount to nothing, but on the other end, it may really make a difference and make a change. And this brings about the buzzword, in case you didn't notice it before, really big on the side. Alfie Kahn is all about educational reform, and specifically in the case against standardized testing, he questions, the purpose of standardized testing. Is this really the best means, to assess students? So at this point, I will ask, is anyone in here for standardized testing? Like, you really think it's the best means? I mean, you can be honest. Like, I'm not going to kick you out or anything. Nobody? Yes? Okay.
It's important.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Kahn actually says that this book was written to challenge those who defend the test. But for the rest of us who kind of think, it's really, they're just stressful. Like, I know when I was in high school, like, when we took these tests, it was the whole day. Like, I would be taken out of my other classes, so I was missing instruction in, the other 3 of my classes just because, I was sitting, they, secluded us in the gym. Like, we were away from everybody. So I was secluded all day, just slaving, really, over these tests. And, I felt like I was missing out on a lot because the teachers can't stop everyone else. They can't stop the rest of the class because you're, taking a test that day. And it's honestly one of my biggest concerns as a pre-service teacher. Like, I don't want to feel like I ever have to teach to the test. And I feel like a lot of people in the field of education feel that way now because some are even bribed with, yearly bonuses just to raise their test scores, which I see as, incredibly unfair. But then they're also threatened with consequences. If they're not, making a big enough difference on the scale, then, their jobs are sometimes at stake. One of my favorite teachers, in fact, the reason that I'm in this class in front of y'all today is because of Miss Melissa Payne. And I had her my 9th and 11th grade years. And just in those 2 years, with the focus on standardized testing, she changed so much. She was just so discouraged and so disheartened going into the classroom every day because, the principal was putting so much pressure on her for these test scores because she also taught 10th grade English, which is what is tested. And so she wasn't even herself anymore. You know, she was still my favorite teacher, but she hated it. Like, you could tell it. And she, honestly, we still keep in contact. We're friends on Facebook. And she is finishing up some graduate work for her master's degree, and she's wanting to get out of secondary education and, you know, move on further, which is really kind of upsetting to me because we need good high school teachers, but, you know, standardized testing is just pushing them away. And really that time spent worrying about the test could be spent, you know, developing critical, creative thinkers, which is really what you need in the world and in the workforce and, you know, further. So to bridge the gap, before I get into creating unity and diversity, I'm going to show this video from Alfie Kohn himself. And it kind of just talks about achievement and standardized. This was written before. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm way off. This was given before he wrote the case against standardized testing, but his ideas in this video are relevant to the book and what I'm about to get into.
Between getting kids to focus on what they're doing, trying to figure out how else this story could have ended, whether there was a different way to solve this math problem and get the right answer, how to design a really effective and efficient and elegant experiment. Getting kids focused on what they're doing, the learning. And on the other hand, getting kids focused on how well they're doing. The schools, the classrooms, the cultures that are constantly emphasizing to kids achievement, performance, high standards are often environments that aren't about learning. Because the more kids are led to focus on how well they're doing, the less engaged they tend to be with what they're doing. Grades are just one example among others, where the schools that pride themselves on being about achievement 24/7 are often anti-intellectual environments.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the diversities that Alfie Kohn specifically mentions in the case against standardized testing. The first one is poverty. Research has proven that the amount of poverty in the community and schools is the biggest determiner of test scores. And this is actually research from the NAEP, which is the National Assessment of Education. Also, Bill Ayers, who is an author, but he's also an educator. He wrote the book To Teach, which I read in another one of my education classes, but y'all may have heard of it as well. He suggested that we could save everyone a lot of time and money by eliminating these tests and just asking a single question: how much does your mom make? And then depending on that answer, okay, well, you're at the bottom. And, you know, that was really, like, striking to me. Like, it's almost scary to think, you know, that just because of the income, these kids are, you know, doomed for failure. Another diversity is intelligence. These tests are made unreasonably hard, like so hard that many, you know, successful adults would have no chance of passing them. The word that Kohn uses a lot is just purposely ridiculous questions. You know, he talked to people who made the test, specifically Roger Farr, who is a professor and helped write a few, said, "I don't think there's any way to build a multiple choice question that allows students to show what they can do with what they know." So it almost makes you think, like, then why are we, you know, assessing them this way if, you know, if even you admit that, you know, that's not a good way. And even more shocking is a former scorer of an essay portion of a standardized test said that a number could be easily assigned without even reading the paper by just skimming it in seconds. These scores were given bonuses for, you know, how many they could go through and score. And that was just, like, shocking to me as an English teacher because, you know, I take a lot of pride in my writing, and I want my future students to take pride in their writing. I want them to, you know, be really critical about these papers. And the fact that, you know, these scores are just so easily going through them it's really scary to me. And standardized testing just really seems to divide kids into, like, winners and losers. They just ignore good characteristics of a learner and that ability to think critically and, you know, not just bubble in, you know, a letter. Another diversity is social and economic and resources and community. Some tests may ask things that the students in that region have never even heard of. The first thing that came to mind is if we were administering a test in New York and we had a question about, like, sweet tea and grits. And they would be like, what? Like, what are these rednecks talking about? I mean, so it has to be, like, relevant. And, you know, I know sometimes even, you know, in Mississippi, like, they, you know, they try to make it work. But, you know, sometimes I'd be like, I don't even know what this is. And this is especially true for minorities. And, you know, people in poverty, I know my mom specifically, she grew up, you know, in poverty. Like, hearing some of her stories, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, thank you for providing for us. She would eat, like, mayonnaise sandwiches, and she would always talk about how she was picked on because she could only afford, her family could only afford, like, one pair of pants a school year. And so she said in the spring, they would be like capris almost. She laughs at the high water trend now. She's like, man, I was just ahead of my time. And, you know, she never got to go on a vacation. And I feel like that's something that I know personally I take for granted. I mean, you know, my family's taken me all kinds of places. But as far as her experience as a child, like, she didn't have one. You know, like, Woolmarket is a tiny town in Biloxi, and if anything was out of Woolmarket, she didn't know about it, really. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. They couldn't afford it. However, affluent families, schools, and districts can afford these practice supplies, which can combat, you know, students in poverty a little bit. It really just, you know, depends. But really, truly, those in poverty are most affected by these standardized tests. And then the last diversity refers to non-native English speakers, and this is incredibly important in my classroom, you know, because I'll be dealing with English. And in the mid-1990s, it appeared as though San Francisco public schools had made amazing progress, but then further scrutiny and research had found that thousands of students that barely spoke English had been excluded from testing. So those that didn't know English just, like, weren't tested. And so it did, you know, it did on paper look like they had made a ton of progress. Eugene Garcia resigned from the advisory committee to the State Board of Education to protest their decision to subject students that did not know the English language to take tests that they could not pass, which seems, you know, incredibly unreasonable. But this actually led to an increase in the number of English-speaking students who scored below the median, which shocked, you know, their affluent families. And this was all due to norm reference testing, because you don't have a big group that can be on the bottom of the spectrum. You know, so, you know, the students who would really score above the median were kind of going down. Personally, going back to the non-native English speakers, this summer with my scholarship program, we had a 2-week seminar, and we had to spend 1 week at Ole Miss and 1 week here. And in the week here, we had a lady who English was not her first language. She was fluent in English, but she's very fluent in Spanish. And so we were all sitting here. I think I was sitting, like, in your chair right there. And she started instructing us in Spanish, like, just looking at us, like, why aren't you understanding this? Like, I'll never forget, she, like, got up here and was, like, talking to me, and I'm like, I do not know what you're saying, like, I don't know what you expect. And, you know, she'd given out these worksheets in Spanish, and I've never taken a Spanish class. I took French in high school. It was just intimidating. I was, like, way off put, but it really made us think, and, you know, that was her goal. Her goal wasn't to, like, scare me in the front row, but her goal was to point out, you know, how ostracized these students feel. You know, if they can't understand anything we're saying, but we're still holding them to the same standard as others, you know, that's terrifying. So, Alfie Kahn gives a lot of suggestions as to how to combat the test, and this was honestly my least favorite part of the book, because he gave, like, a list of 16 reasons, and they were very radical. But as a new teacher, like, I'm not going to be able to do these. You know, I'm really not. Unfortunately, he says that, you know, you could organize boycotts, challenge public officials, you know, stage protests, and I'm just like, these are great ideas, but I really want a job. I really want to be making money. And even he gave an example of Mr. Jim Bogus, who had taught at a school for 28 years. He told his principal that he wouldn't administer the test and received a stern letter of reprimand and a warning to not pull that again. And so, at first I was like, oh, well, maybe after a few years of experience, I'll be able to make a difference. But, I mean, this guy had been here for 28 years, and he was still, he was getting in trouble. And so that was really discouraging to me as well. Even though I can't use many of his proposals, I can create unity in diversity by acknowledging the diversities in my classroom and teaching the students, critically so that they can rise above their circumstances and succeed on standardized tests that they're subject to take. But more importantly, I want them to succeed in the real world. And so that is the main goal. And Khan really helps with that and gives insight.